Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran and I'm itching for some alts. I've actually recently put up a poll for you guys to vote on with 5 different classes and or specs that I'm interested in playing next, and let you guys vote on them because I want to play everything, and I'll let you guys figure out what should I level first or last. And in today's video, if you're someone who's trying to get some characters up and running, if you're looking to raid, which a lot of us do, you might be looking for a fresh new alt or maybe even a new main after you figure out what the meta is at. In this video, I want to analyze some of the numbers we have from the current raid tier and look at some of the specs that are becoming very quickly popular for raiding in particular. You guys always ask me to talk about some of the strongest specs, what is looking the best, what is looking like the meta, and usually I tell you guys to play what you like, but finally I am going to dive into some of you guys' questions and suggestions and talk about what are looking like 5 of the strongest DPS classes for the current raid meta as of right now in today's video. Now, what do I mean by popular specs? I'm not talking about the classes or specs that everybody is playing. I'm not talking about numbers, because everybody might have started with, let's say, a safe class like a warrior, demon hunter, mage, maybe even a priest, but a lot of us are probably going to be re-rolling to other things that are just looking more interesting. The specs I want to cover are the ones that are just all of a sudden on everyone's lips. Everybody's talking about them and even talking about leveling those classes as their maybe a potential new main or a viable alt. A lot of my guildies and friends are looking for more things to play, and as we see the meta get constructed, we get to find out which specs and classes are looking solid, particularly for the raiding environment where you'll be slaying bosses and adds in order to collect the fat loot. The first spec and class on this list that's going to be very impressive as a DPS has been the Balanced Druid. Boomkins overall are looking solid in terms of people picking them up and people playing them. Boomies have been a very strong spec, looking forward to in the alpha and the beta, and while going through a controversial change of gaining the Eclipse system back in a weird way that wasn't exactly the same as the previous system but very similar, people were a little bit cautious about how good are they gonna be. But after watching Boomkins drop into the Night Fate Covenant, slapping around new moons as well as star surges in Convoke Spirits, everybody decided, you know what, looks like Boomkins are looking really good. It's still a very strong spec for all the utility stuff with innervates and even trees inside of Mythic Pluses. It also got plenty of CC, and with a lot more hybridness added to this class going into this current expansion, Boomkin's actually looking quite solid. In fact, they're so good they've actually got a couple nerfs, not enough to take him from the top DPS or definitely a top contender for this current raid, but they've gotten some necessary nerfs in order to be more in line with other specs because they were just so far ahead of everyone. So Boomies are looking like a really solid choice for raiding in particular. And of course we have to talk about a melee because you know this rule. In raids, usually the ranged dominate the scene. However, melee do have a place in this expansion, and the first melee that a lot of people are looking at is Unholy Death Knight. I feel like everybody that's raiding has 1 or 2 or maybe 40 of these if you are going to be doing any kind of competitive raiding. Unholy Death Knights are so far looking like a really solid melee with extremely strong pets and damage that also got nerfed a couple times like Boomies, but still, even though through all those nerfs, it's not enough to hold them down. The biggest issue with Unholy Death Knights is mobility. If the fight has a lot of movement, they'll lose a lot of value. However, with a lot of the fights in Castle Nathria being super light on movement, except for 1 or 2 odd fights, Unholy Death Knights end up being really solid. I mean, they're so strong, priests are lining up in droves to pop a PI in those bad boys as they're summoning the full army of the dead. Everyone said this is going to be a Death Knight themed expansion, and it looks like Unholy is really taking over. Another caster on this list that we really gotta address is Affliction Warlocks, after getting it changed from Battle for Azeroth into this expansion. Affliction Warlocks have found a bit more of a niche. They still can dump great damage into bosses, but now they have a little bit more control over the dots and play with it. They can do a lot more cleave play style, they can do a little bit more control, a little bit more focus into enemies, and if there's any mobility ever, these guys can pop their dots on the move. So far, they just have been one of the more solid DPS to bring, but also they're pretty tanky. With a lot of mechanics doing side damage, there's always a need for a caster that can sustain themselves. Warlocks kind of naturally come equipped with that baseline. Plus, I'm a huge fan of curses. I know curses isn't the big thing, and I know you guys have told me, you know, it's not a DPS increase. I like being able to do things outside of just damage, and I feel like Blizzard found that nice niche that Warlocks have had at some point or another. applying curses to debuff enemies. I think it's just a small thing, but combined together with the toolkit of a battle res, the gateways, and the personal teleport makes him even more mobile. I think it is a really solid spec to get into, at least for raiding currently. The only thing I don't like about Warlocks is how so many have to play Night Fae for the one dot, and I'm hoping that maybe Blizzard considers buffing the other playstyles in order to facilitate more opportunities. Another range we'll have to have on this list is Hunters, and already we knew that Hunters were going to be a massive help inside of raids. Hunters, whether Beast Mastery or Marksmanship, usually can do mechanics fairly well. They generally have good mobility, they have an immunity, they have traps and CC that they can use kind of on demand, but mostly comes down to the damage output of this class. That's like the one class that isn't a true caster. The way I always looked at casters are classes that casts that can be interrupted, and Hunters just don't have that kind of like issues. They don't get interrupted, they don't have any pushback on their abilities, they can kind of just fire away at the enemy. They're kind of slot that middle ground between a rogue and maybe like a mage, and I think it just fit right in. And with some of the reworks and changes that Blizzard has done to Marksman, although not major, are enough to make Marksman shine so well going into this expansion, primarily for the raiding tier. Maybe at some point Beastmaster will have a go in some of the fights if maybe more mobility is required, but Marksman so far shines strong and true. And finally we have to put another melee that's looking like an up-and-comer, which is the Windwalker Monk. Probably not a lot of you guys expected this. A lot of you thought maybe I would tell you another caster or range class rather, but Windwalker Monk's actually looking solid all of a sudden, and there's a couple different reasons for it. Monks right now actually have good throughput in terms of just the raw damage they can put out. Surprisingly, they actually can hold their own, which sometimes it comes down to, can the class put out numbers or can they not? And sometimes not every class can be at the top of the meters, and monks right now are doing well. But also because of, I think, the changes to the play. You're not always going to bring a mystery or monk to every fight. It looks like Restoration Shamans and Holy Priests and Holy Paladins and Disc Priests are looking like a pretty staple healing pool right now for most Mythic Raiding groups. And when it comes to tanks, Death Knights are looking solid, but so do Demon Hunters, and there's just so much magic damage in this raid that being able to self-heal or prevent that magic damage as a DH just makes more sense. So then you still need a monk for that monk buff. Combine that with the fact that monks can do damage and the mobility they bring, and the massive toolkit of kind of like a jack of all trades. They're grading single target, grading AoE, grading cleave, grading like enemies being split apart from each other. I think just feels so much niche in terms of the variety of damage output they can put in that it just makes it a very solid spec and class to try to get into right now going into this expansion. A lot of you guys have asked, are monks going to be good? And it looks like a lot of you guys have your answer, at least for this current raid tier. And that's going to be the list of 5 really popular looking specs and classes on the come up for the raiding tier. This video isn't really made to tell you guys which classes to play. I'm just trying to give you guys what looks really strong right now for raids, in case it is something you are interested in. I'm still probably going to stick to the specs that I enjoy. Arcane Mages, Survival Hunters, Feral Druids, Outlaw Rogues, because I like the playstyle of them, and I'll try different Covenants and Conduits that are going to be maybe off meta because that's just what I enjoyed. But I know a lot of you guys have asked me what is the best, what is top tier, what is looking really solid, what's everybody playing, what class or spec can I play so I don't get kicked from groups, what's looking like the most popular thing right now. And hopefully this gives you guys a bit of an idea, at least for the environment of raiding. These specs are looking really solid. A lot of players are playing them in high-end raiding tier for a reason, and if you're leveling some alts, you could check them out yourselves as well. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in another one.